right, so welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving straight into something we know a lot of you struggle with. That feeling you get when you're about to speak English. It's like your throat closes up, or that kind of nervousness.
Yeah.
You are very much not alone.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's super common. It's a huge hurdle.
Yeah.
So that's exactly why we're focusing on it today. We're going to break down those fears, challenge some of the thinking that might be making it worse. And by the end, you should have some solid strategies to really help. So that hesitation you feel, hopefully it'll start feeling less like a brick wall and more like, just a small bump in the road.
I love that analogy. Just a little bump. Okay, let's get into it. Why does speaking English trigger so much anxiety for so many people? Like, what's at the core of this?
A lot of it boils down to the fear of making mistakes.
Right.
Learners often get stuck in their heads picturing the worst possible scenario, right? Like saying something totally wrong, not being understood at all, or even, being laughed at. And it's a powerful deterrent.
Yeah, that inner critic, man. But here's the thing. Even those of us who speak English natively, as our first language, I mean, trust me, I mess up sentences all the time. We make mistakes constantly. It's not about reaching some mythical level of perfect speech. It's more about, just keeping going.
Yeah.
We don't let a little slip up completely derail the conversation, I mean, think about it. Do you always speak your native language perfectly?
Right.
Fluency is about communication, not about being flawless.
It is. That's a key distinction. And kind of tied into that is the fear of being judged, right? People worry that if their English isn't perfect, others will think they're not intelligent.
Oh, yeah?
Or capable.
A big one.
It is.
Let me ask you this, though. When you hear someone trying to speak your language, maybe struggling a little, what's your honest reaction? I can tell you for me, I know our co-host Julia feels the same way. It's never judgment. It's respect.
Yeah.
Like, wow, they're putting themselves out there. It takes courage to speak a new language.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely an admiration for the effort. And then there's another big one, the feeling of not knowing enough words. It's like, okay, I just need to learn a few thousand more words, and then I'll be ready to speak.
It's like waiting for this green light that never turns on.
Exactly.
Let's be real. You don't need to memorize the entire dictionary to have a conversation, I mean, think about little kids. They start with a tiny vocabulary, mama, dada, milk, but they still manage to communicate their needs. And through that, they learn more and more. They don't wait till they know every word. They just jump right in.
That's such a good point. They learn by doing, by engaging. If you keep waiting for that adequate vocabulary, you're going to be stuck on the sidelines forever. You'll always feel like you're just a few more words away from being ready.
So we've got those core anxieties.
Yeah.
Making mistakes, being judged, feeling unprepared. These are totally valid feelings. But here's the thing. Perfect English. It's not the price of admission for speaking. The biggest, most important step is to just, open your mouth and start talking.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And to help with that, let's bust some of the myths that often hold learners back. One of the biggest ones is this. I have to be perfect before I can even think about speaking.
This one is so persistent. It's this idea that you need perfect grammar, a native accent, like all the bells and whistles, before you can even say a single word.
But if we take a step back and look at reality, as we mentioned earlier, perfect speech doesn't actually exist. Native speakers, we mess up grammar all the time. We forget words.
Oh, yeah.
We say and way more than we'd like to admit.
I'm a champion on air. I can attest to that.
Exactly. It's just part of natural conversation.
And here's the thing. Fluency doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from practice. You become more fluent by speaking, not by waiting until you feel ready.
Absolutely. That's so important. Another myth we hear a lot is the only good practice is with a native English speaker.
Yeah, this one can feel like a huge barrier, especially if you don't have easy access to native speakers.
Right. And while talking to native speakers is definitely beneficial, it's not the only way to improve. Think about it. You can practice with other learners.
True.
They understand your struggles, right?
Yeah.
And you can even use AI chatbots. They can give you instant feedback, and it's a totally judgment-free space.
Oh, the chatbots. That's a great point. What about other ways to practice, though?
Sure, there are tons. You can record voice messages for language exchange partners, join online groups specifically for speaking practice, even just read aloud to yourself, focusing on pronunciation and rhythm.
The point is, you don't have to wait for the perfect partner to magically appear. Consistent practice in whatever form you can manage is much more important.
I totally agree. Okay, myth number 3. I need a huge vocabulary to even start speaking.
Ah, the classic feeling of being overwhelmed by words. Like you need to know thousands upon thousands before you can even form a sentence.
The truth is, most everyday conversations use a pretty small set of words. Research shows that knowing just 500 to 1,000 common words can get you through a lot of daily interactions.
Think about it. You can say, the weather's really nice today.
Mm,
Or you can say something like, the atmospheric conditions are highly favorable.
right.
They both mean the same thing. But the first one, it's simpler. And it's how people actually talk.
Yeah, that's a great example.
You don't need fancy words to be understood.
Exactly.
All right, last myth. And this one is a biggie. If I make a mistake, people will laugh at me. That fear of being ridiculed, it can be really, really paralyzing.
Absolutely. I get it, putting yourself out there is scary, but let's think about this. When you hear someone learning your language and they make a mistake, what do? Do you laugh?
I mean, almost never. My first thought is usually good for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're making an effort. I might even try to help them find the right word.
Exactly. Most people are not going to laugh. They understand how tough language learning is. Making mistakes. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're trying. It means you're learning.
So just to recap those myths, you don't need perfection to start. Native speakers aren't the only key to practice. You don't need a dictionary-sized vocabulary. And people are, for the most part, not going to laugh at your mistakes.
Right. Okay, we've tackled some fears, busted some myths. Now, what can our listeners actually do? What are some concrete steps to overcome that hesitation and start speaking with confidence?
Okay, step number 1 is to work on changing your mindset about mistakes. See them as opportunities to learn. Don't think of them as failures or something to be ashamed of.
This is so huge. Each mistake is it's feedback. It shows you what you need to work on. It's like any new skill,
Right.
Riding a bike, playing an instrument. You don't get it perfect right away. It's all about trial and error.
Exactly. You fall off the bike, you get back up, you hit a wrong note, you try again. And little kids, they're the masters of learning from mistakes. They're not scared to try. They're not worried about messing up. They just do it.
They do. They really do.
So start challenging that negative voice in your head, the one that says, I'm not good enough, I'm going to sound stupid. Replace those thoughts with positive ones. Tell yourself, I'm getting better every time. I'm learning something new with every sentence. It might sound cheesy, but it makes a difference.
It does.
Okay, step 2. Start small. You don't need to jump into complex debates or super long conversations right away. Begin with simple interactions,
Like what kind of things?
like just greeting someone with a hello or ordering your coffee in English. You can even have a conversation with yourself in your head where you describe what you're doing in English.
I like that.
And maybe pick one simple sentence each day and practice that, like, how's your day going? Or this coffee's delicious. The goal is to get comfortable with the physical act of speaking English.
It's like a warm-up, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't lift a heavy weight without stretching first. These small conversations, they're your warm-up for more challenging speaking later on.
Love it. Okay, step 3. Create a daily speaking routine.
Now, this doesn't have to be some huge time commitment, right? Even just 5 minutes a day can make a big difference over time.
5 minutes, that's all it takes.
You can talk about your day, describe your surroundings, your favorite hobbies, anything. The important thing is to be consistent.
And there are a ton of resources to help with this. Language learning apps, online groups, even recording yourself and listening back. Short, regular practice beats long, sporadic practice every time.
100%. Okay, step number 4. Get comfortable with being imperfect. Don't focus on perfect grammar and pronunciation all the time. Focus on being understood.
Yeah. When someone's learning your language and they make a mistake,
Yeah.
do you usually still get what they're saying? I mean, most of the time, yeah. Doesn't have to be perfect for the message to get through.
Exactly. At the end of the day, people want to understand you. They don't need you to speak like a textbook. So if you can't think of a specific word, don't panic. Keep talking. Use your hands. Use other words. Find a different way to say it.
Resourcefulness, yes. And our 5th and final step, find a safe and supportive environment to practice.
It's so crucial to have people who are encouraging, who will be patient with you. Maybe it's a friend, a tutor, someone online.
And if you don't have a practice partner right away, don't let that stop you. Check out online communities. They can be super welcoming. Or just practice by yourself. Talk to the mirror. Narrate what you're doing around the house. The more you practice in a comfortable setting, the less scary it'll feel to speak English anywhere.
So to recap our steps, change your mindset about mistakes, start small, build a routine, embrace imperfection, and find a safe space to practice.
Great. I think people can really work with those steps. But, beyond the practical stuff, there's something even more fundamental.
Mm-hmm.
Your mindset. Cultivating a positive
Oh,
attitude.
this is so important. Your mindset really colors your whole learning experience.
Yeah, it can feel like an exciting adventure
Mm-hmm.
or a terrifying obstacle course.
Totally. If you're always focused on the possibility of messing up, that anxiety can become crippling. But what if you shifted your focus? What if you saw each speaking opportunity as a chance to practice and get better? It can really change how you approach the whole thing.
Right, because here's the deal. Negative self-talk, it erodes your confidence.
Hmm.
But positive self-talk, it builds you up. It makes you more willing to take risks, to speak up.
It creates this positive feedback loop.
And there's actual research that shows that people who have a positive mindset tend to learn languages faster. Why? Because they're not afraid to experiment. They're not afraid to make mistakes. And as we've already discussed, mistakes are a vital part of learning.
It all comes back to those kids, right? They're fearless. They're not afraid to try new things. And they don't dwell on their mistakes.
So how can we nurture a more positive mindset, specifically towards speaking English?
Hmm.
Well, we've got 3 actionable things you can do right away. Number 1, practice positive self-talk. Replace those negative thoughts. My English is bad. I'm going to sound stupid. With positive ones, like I'm improving every day, I'm learning new things all the time. It might sound silly, but it can make a real difference.
And number 2, celebrate the small wins. Did you understand that English video? Did you use a new phrase in a conversation? Recognize those little victories. It reinforces your progress and keeps you motivated.
And lastly, surround yourself with positivity. Find podcasts, watch videos of other language learners who have had success. Connect with supportive communities online or in person. The people you surround yourself with, the content you consume, it all impacts your mindset.
It really does. And I'll add one more thing. Try visualization. Spend a few minutes each day imagining yourself speaking confidently in different situations. This can actually train your brain to believe in that possibility, which can make it feel less scary and more achievable.
It's like mental rehearsal for your speaking muscles.
Exactly.
So the bottom line is, your mindset. It's not just some passive thing. You can control it. You can train it. It's a tool you can use to make the whole process of learning English more enjoyable and more successful.
100%. Okay, so let's talk about actual real-world conversations.
Yeah.
I get that even with the best mindset and all the practice, those initial real-time interactions can still be nerve-wracking.
Totally. Practicing in a safe space is one thing, but a live conversation, it can feel like a whole other ballgame. So what are some tips to help people feel more comfortable and confident when they're actually speaking English with someone?
Here's a big one. Keep it simple. Don't get caught up in trying to create perfect, super complex sentences, especially when you're just starting out. Focus on clarity, on getting your message across.
Right, like instead of saying, I am currently experiencing some difficulties with the functionality of my internet connectivity, just say, my internet's not working. Simple, clear, effective.
Perfect example. Another tip. Don't be afraid to use conversation fillers. Those little words and phrases that native speakers use all the time.
Oh, you mean like, well, let me think, all those.
Yep, all of those. And, which we all use way more than we probably should.
Speaking of, so those little fillers, they're not a sign of weakness or a small vocabulary. They're actually tools. They give you a moment to gather your thoughts before you speak. So if someone asks you a question and you need a second to process it, it's okay to say something like, that's a good question. It's natural, and it buys you some time.
It does, it does. And one more tip. Ask questions to keep the conversation going.
Ooh, clever. Takes the pressure off you to do all the talking.
Exactly. Asking questions shows that you're interested and engaged, and it also prevents those awkward silences.
Like if someone says, I went to a great movie last night. Instead of just saying, oh, cool, you can ask, what kind of movie was it? It keeps the conversation going.
And it gives you a little break from speaking.
Exactly. So to recap, keep your language simple. Don't be afraid to use fillers. And ask questions. It makes conversation smoother and takes some of the pressure off you.
I love those tips.
So we've covered a lot today. We looked at the reasons behind the fear of speaking, busted some common myths, laid out practical steps. We talked about the power of mindset and gave some tips for real conversations. But if there's one thing I want you to remember from all of this, it's this. No fear, just talk.
Absolutely. Remember, making mistakes is inevitable. It's part of the process. Every time you try to speak, no matter how imperfect it feels, you are moving forward.
So here's a little challenge for you. Today, find one person, a friend, a classmate, even just yourself in the mirror, and say something, anything in English. Just take that first step.
And believe in yourself. With practice and a positive attitude, you can absolutely overcome this fear and start speaking English with confidence and joy.
And here's the beautiful thing. The more you do it, the easier it gets, and the more confident you become. So keep practicing, keep learning, and always remember, no fear, just talk.
Just talk.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.